This is the Emergency Medical Minute, sponsored by Mile High Ambulance.
Hey EMM, we are excited to announce that we are now accepting applications for our second annual Diversity and Inclusion Award. The award is eligible to fourth-year med students identifying as underrepresented in medicine and are applying to EM residencies. We are extending 3 $200 awards to selected individuals following a blinded review of all applications. Applications will be accepted through the end of November, with winners being announced mid-December. Check out our website at www.emergencymedicalminute.org/EDI-award for all the details and to access the free application. Or you can click on the link in our show notes. Thank you.
All right. So I was just going to do a quick update on, well, it's not even really an update, but more just kind of like a, let's make sure we're on the same page on TXA. So I have my own biased roles of doing stuff with their life and seeing all the cases that come in and everything else. And, you know, Swedish is a big referral center, so we get a lot of the receiving end of things. With TXA, I think it's good just that we should always be kind of aware, because it's one of those things that with trauma, we have a very limited window on when it's beneficial. So as a reminder, TXA is something that we give early in trauma. There's lots of indications for use, but in this case, we're talking about trauma to help prevent these kind of bad outcomes that come from bleeding. And especially in that first 24-hour period is the most critical when trauma patients are prone to die from hemorrhagic shock. So what TXA does is it helps stabilize clots that are already there. It kind of helps break down the clotting process that would normally kind of turn over clots. It's basically interrupting that process. So as your body's formed clots, it stabilizes clots that are already getting formed. And anybody know offhand the dose? Claire, I'm looking at you. No, just kidding. No, just teasing.
240 over 10 minutes, maybe it's 120 over 10 minutes, and then...
Well, yeah, so usually you're doing this bolus dose, it's 1 gram, and then another gram that's an infusion after that. So it's typically it's a total of 2 grams that you get, but it's kind of a bolus and then an infusion. And that came out of cardiac literature, where they would do these cardiac OR kind of studies, and then that got translated to the crash studies where we were looking at trauma patients. And so that's where they got the dose from, which then seemed to work well. So that was it. It was 1 gram bolus, 1 gram infusion. What often happens is we get these trauma patients, they're at some kind of small facility. If they get that gram bolus, great. And then any idea what happens after that? Infusion? Yeah, right? One is their hands are tied. Transports, they have limited interventions or times or pumps or whatever else. And so then by the time they get here and then somebody remembers it, there's a good chance it's after 3 hours, because it is a very narrow window. You want to do it early on in trauma. And so there are people who started looking at, can we just give the 2 grams up front? And the answer is, it seems yes. I mean, there's not like huge data or as big as the initial studies that have looked for that, but there's no harm in doing 2 grams versus 1 gram, and there was no difference in outcomes or anything else that they saw. There's even some military data where they did 2 gram in bolus as well as a 1 gram infusion, so a bigger dose than normal, and still, they were basically all the same outcome. So it seems like some TXA is just as good as that, as long as we get to that 2 gram mark or threshold there. So I think on our end as the receiving facility for a lot of these traumas is, one is making sure, did they get TXA? Are we within the window, and how much did they get? And so again, I never try to make things overly complicated. On the dose is 658 milligrams over per kilo. No, it's 1 gram and 1 gram, or ideally just 2 grams all at once. So I think that's just one of those things that we can try to look for and report, try to make sure we know, because then once we realize it, we might be out of the window where it's not going to help and actually could even cause harm. So, all right. Thank you, guys.
We'd like to thank our sponsor, Health One Continental Division, and Swedish Medical Center for their financial contributions to the EMM. Donations from them and listeners like you make it possible for us to fulfill our mission of producing and spreading free medical education to the masses. If you enjoy our show, please consider making a one-time or recurring donation to help cover our operational costs and keep the EMM awesome. Click on the link in our show notes to make a donation. Thank you for listening.